7/11 train blasts that happened in 2006. 190 innocent lives were lost. The second blast happened a few months after 7/11. That was Malegaon 2006 blast. And the third that happened more recently was at Pune German Bakery in 2010. Now, since this blast and these investigations started occurring, there were conflicting reports in the media about the culpability of the accused the police had arraigned. That aroused my curiosity about the truth behind these investigations. So I started putting together these facts and the documents around a year ago. And what I found was that different agencies, different anti-terror agencies, were presenting different versions of the same conspiracy before different courts. So a court A in Ahmedabad was presented with a different story. A court B in Mumbai was presented with yet another different story. A court C again in Mumbai was presented with yet another different story. And different agencies were touting contradictory confessions of the same accused before different courts. And I found it absolutely astounding, bizarre and shocking that all these anti-terror agencies had different confessions from the same accused in different courts of law. So if an agency wanted a certain kind of confession from an accused A before Ahmedabad court, they had a tailor-made confession ready there. Mumbai Crime Branch and Maharashtra ATS today are peddling two different, completely contradictory confessions before two courts in the same premises in Bombay. In the same premises, both courts sit in the same premises, and they are considering two confessions of the same accused, but completely contradictory. 7/11, the train blasts, was the biggest terror conspiracy after the 1993 bomb blast. So when I started investigating, I found that how did the Mumbai police go about investigating it? So the biggest, most elaborate, sophisticated conspiracy after the 1993 blast, and you'll be amazed to know that the method that Mumbai police adopted for the investigation, they went after the usual suspects. So the Simi activists, formal or informal, whom the police assumed to be Simi activists, and who were under a constant radar of different agencies, and who are being regularly hauled up to the police stations for the last 6 years since Simi was banned in 2001. Every time a bomb exploded in Bombay, all the Simi activists were lined up before different police stations. They started their investigation with these Simi suspects. And they were kept in illegal detention, some for 15 days, some for 20 days, some for 30 days. And as days went by, and as the police had absolutely no clue, they eventually implicated these 13 Simi activists as accused in 7/11 train conspiracy, and they are behind bars for the last 7 years. So what was the evidence on the basis of which these Simi activists were arraigned as accused? There were three kinds of evidence. One, Makoka confessions. There were 9 Makoka confessions, and that's the linchpin of the police case, Makoka confessions. The second, recovery. They have recovered certain explosives and detonators from the accused, from the houses of a few accused. And number 3, some eyewitnesses, unlikely eyewitnesses who a few months after the blast claimed that they saw these accused getting in, getting out of the train at different points of time and that they gave this testimony 6 months after the blast. So I started investigating about the credentials of these witnesses. I found they were all stool pigeons. So either they were professional punch of police. So in several cases, I found that they had been punched in 7, 8, 10, 15 cases, and now they were made as witnesses. Or they were under some obligation. The police say they were facing some criminal prosecution from the ATS. So and a crucial eyewitness, on the one hand, is facing a criminal prosecution from the same agency, which is citing him as an important eyewitness in a terror case. Anyway, then I further started probing, and I started interviewing or meeting and developing my contacts in different anti-terror agencies. And I found that in 2008, they arrested certain accused. One of them was Sadiq Sheikh, and they claimed that he was a founding member of the alleged terror outfit Indian Mujahideen. And I found that all these terror agencies, that was a crucial juncture in anti-terror investigations in the country. That was a time when all these anti-terror agencies, they came together to probe blast cases. And I found that all these terror agencies, at least 7 or 8 of them, they interrogated Sadiq Sheikh, they prepared confessions, and they used only those portions of the confessions that suited their case. So before the Mumbai crime branch, Sadiq Sheikh told the Mumbai crime branch that he was involved in all the blasts that had occurred since 2003. He gave a list of 9 blasts. And he said that I have done this, my other accused accomplices have done this. And he's repeated the same theory before 6 or 7 other agencies. And all meticulously drafted, chronicled with these agencies. But when the same Sadiq Sheikh is remanded in police custody or sent for police remand to Maharashtra ATS, they change his confession. They say, no, everything else is true what he's saying, but his testimony to his involvement in 7/11 is doctored and tutored, and that he gave under the police pressure. I got from my sources all the confessions, all these internal documents that these different anti-terror agencies had collated. I'm putting out in the public domain almost documents running into 300 pages of all these anti-terror agencies that shows, one, that there are different faces of the same truth. One face for the court, one for internal consumption of the agencies, one for court A, one for court B, and yet another for court C. And they tailor-made their confessions. And subsequently to Sadiq's arrest, Hemant Karkare was heading the ATS at that time. He died. And after Hemant Karkare's demise, Maharashtra government reappointed KP Raghuvanshi's ATS chief, who was the supervisory officer of the original 7/11 investigation. And under his watch, those 13 accused had been arraigned or made accused. Now he takes over the job of ATS chief. He takes Sadiq Sheikh in his custody, and he goes back to the court. He says that everything else is true, but his confession to the extent of his involvement in 7/11 is not true, and that was done under police pressure. And the court accepts that explanation, and he is discharged from the case. But other agencies, they keep the same confession where Sadiq Sheikh had accepted his involvement in 7/11, and they proceed with their separate prosecutions in other courts. Now, it cannot be acceptable to a country governed by rule of law that one agency is being allowed to tout one confession, another agency is being allowed to tout yet another confession, and they are all from the same accused, and they all actually indicate towards the same integral conspiracy. I then interviewed 8 of these accused in court premises, and they gave me heart-rending stories of police torture, coercion, offers of women, money, and all other kinds of enticements that were made to them. First, they tortured them and they extracted confessions out of them. Then the bribe and the money and other kinds of enticements were offered to them to turn approvers. But they didn't turn approvers in 7/11. After 7/11, within 2 months, happened Malegaon 2006 blast. Again, the investigation went to the Maharashtra ATS. So what does the Maharashtra ATS do? They again made 9 semi-activists as accused in Malegaon 2006. And they did 2 more things. They said that 2 of the accused between 7/11 and Malegaon are common. And they also claimed that the source of explosives is common. And the person who supplied the explosives are also common. Now I'm also putting out in the public domain the interrogation report that NIA has drafted and made of the accused they have arrested, and they are entirely different set of accused. They belong to different denomination. They are from the Hindutva outfits, radical Hindutva outfits, and they claim that they have done the blast. And they claim that they brought the explosives. So if the explosives from Malegaon 2006 blast didn't come from the 7/11 accused, if the Malegaon 2006 blast was not done by the 7/11 accused, and was done by entirely another set of accused belonging to a different denomination, then what does it say about the ATS investigation in both the cases, which is 7/11 and Malegaon 2006? And the most shocking part is that the one court has no mechanism to know what is happening in another court. So neither do the accused have any mechanism to know, to find out, or the agents have, their counsel have any mechanism to find out what is happening in other agencies. And all these facts, the internal documents, the interrogation reports, were never shared with the court, were not put out in the public domain. So one, we are putting out all this document in the public domain, which that shows a couple of things. My intention is not to establish the guilt of A group of people against B group of people, but just to expose the absolute farcical manner in which the terror investigations are done in this country, because there are two primary issues involved here. One, we are alienating the minority community. We are implicating innocent Muslims. We are destroying their lives. We are destroying their families. And we are misleading the courts. But every time an innocent is framed, the real culprit gets away. And when the real culprit gets away, he gets further emboldened. And he carries out more blasts. So not only our terror agencies are showing utter contempt and disregard to the due process of law, to our constitutional values, to the life and liberty of our citizens, to the life and liberty of the minorities, but also they are, with their action, they are putting our internal security in a very perilous situation. These are the two cases. The third case I want to talk about is the Pune German bakery blast. In this case, the Maharashtra ATS arrested a youth from Udgir town in Beed district in Maharashtra. And they said he did the blast. And that happened 7 or 8 months after the blast. Before that, they arrested a boy named Abdul Samad. And when his family came up with video evidence and pictorial evidence of his presence at a wedding 1,000 kilometers away from the blast site, they just let him away. And after letting him away, they arrested this boy, Himayat Beg. And they said that he has carried out the blast with accused A, who is still absconding. And his family and the accused produces his mobile phone record that shows that he was not present in Pune the day blast occurred. They said, no, he kept his mobile somewhere else. On the very same night when the blast, on the same day the blast happened, on the very same night, he was present at a wedding 500 kilometers away from the blast site. They said, no, he immediately after doing the blast, he drove to the wedding ceremony, which was 500 kilometers away. Fine, he was sent for trial. 1 year after his arrest, Delhi Special Cell arrests an accused named Qatil Siddiqui. And that boy, Qatil Siddiqui, tells Delhi police that actually I was responsible for the Pune German bakery blast. And he not only tells the Delhi police, he also tells the same story to Bangalore police. And both Delhi police and Bangalore police, they prepare confessions or interrogation reports running in almost 70-80 pages. That is, again, I am going to put out in the public domain. Now, Maharashtra ATS is faced with a very curious problem because they have already arrested someone and sent him for trial. So they send an officer here. He records a fresh confession, and he says that everything is true except to his involvement in Pune German bakery blast. Everything else is true. He says, no, he was not involved in Pune German bakery blast. His idea was to carry out a separate blast 2 days before Pune German bakery happened. And this is the truth. Everything else is true. And he goes back to Pune and files a fresh complaint and makes him an accused in a separate case, separate from Pune German bakery. And that boy is taken to Pune jail for police remand. The boy remains in police custody for 21 days, then he's sent to judicial custody. In judicial custody, the day he was supposed to be brought back to Delhi to be produced in a Delhi court in Pune Yerwada jail, and 2 co-prisoners, they say that we strangulated him to death because we had an angry exchange of words in high security prison, Anda cell, and they confessed to the crime, and they said that the rope with which we strangulated him, we burnt it and we flushed it down the toilet. So no recovery, nothing, just 2 police confessions. And it passes without any questioning and is accepted by the police. So this is the material that I'm putting out, and I don't know, I wanted to play a documentary of the interviews that I have done with the accused. Is it ready now?
And spoken and unspoken suggestion that any questioning of police methods is an impediment to terror investigations, letting in confessions, self-incriminatory statements recorded by the police, declarations at the highest level that terrorists have no human rights. All in all, I think the chief facet of our counterterrorism policy is a slackening of investigative accountability. And while many of us have for long been theoretically saying that this is both fundamentally unjust and fundamentally inexpedient, Ashish's research demonstrates the fact so clearly, and it also demonstrates a definite communal bias. And I mean, the crux of what I have understood his research to be is that you have this anti-terror agency which finds material suggesting that people who it has in its custody may not be guilty, but instead of bringing it up before a court or investigating it, it doctors internal records, fudges material, goes to the extent of not only obliterating record, but perhaps obliterating individuals. So for the same incident, you have different versions in different parts of the country in different courts. And so this is something which goes beyond just normal padding of a case or, you know, something that I think our institutional conscience must confront, recognize, and fight at every level. We have with us today Mr. Shanti Bhushan, and I was privileged to be with him when he consummately debunked the utility, the wisdom, and above all, the fairness of allowing confessions recorded by the police. I was also privileged to be with him when we challenged the invocation of Makoka for the very Malegaon accused, who have now been demonstrated to be innocent, but nevertheless, I think they're only out on bail. I don't think the case against them has been withdrawn. We have Wajahat Habibullah of the Minorities Commission, but for whose efforts, and of course, Vinod Sharma has been our invaluable ally, but for whose efforts, the innocents who were implicated in the Mecca Masjid case and other cases would have never even got the small relief that they did get. We have Gopal Subramaniam, eminent lawyer, former Solicitor General, who has represented the prosecution in several important terror cases and is very insightful on the subject. We also have Raju Ramachandran, whose meticulous work as amicus, not only in the Gujarat cases, but also in Kasab's case, and his insightful writings on related subjects makes him an important person to be here with us today. So may I first request Mr. Shanti Bhushan to address the gathering. Thank you, sir.
As is my habit, I went through it very meticulously to examine as to whether a totally foolproof case had been made out by all the investigation that he had done. And I can safely say that he has made out a foolproof case against all his investigation agencies and exposed the various techniques that he used to hoist and support a false case known to them that the case is false, and the various methods that they employ in doing so. I'm reminded after reading this, of course I must say, nothing is more important public service than what Ashish Khaitan has done in this case. Because if an innocent person has to languish in jail for years and years, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, before he can be acquitted, and sometimes he can be got wrongly convicted even after a long trial on account of these various techniques employed by the various sections of police officers. Nothing can be more dangerous for the people of an Indian Republic, where the lives of each one of us are in the hands of a corrupt police system. None of us is safe, except that the police normally hesitates to touch a person who is regarded by society as an important person. They are careful in that regard. But how many people are there of that kind? Otherwise, by and large, the people of the country are so vulnerable that they are not only their own lives, but the lives of their families are entirely in the hands of these corrupt police people. I am reminded of what a very eminent judge of the Allahabad High Court, Justice N.Ullah, had said many decades back in a very important judgment. He said that the largest organization of criminals who commit all kinds of offenses is the Indian Police Service. He said so in a judgment. How true it is! It is true that the Supreme Court, in public interest, expunged those remarks in the appeal by the state. But perhaps the Supreme Court expunged the remarks, but they were also convinced that this is the police, Indian police, which is the kind of offense under the IPC which the police does not commit. They fabricate evidence, they conspire to produce perjured evidence, they even they resort to murder, namely by faked encounters, etc. Every kind of an offense they commit. They torture people in police custody, enforce police, get police confessions made to the police, procured from them, and they rely upon them. There have been 3 laws. Even the British did not permit a confession made to a police officer to be admissible as evidence. They were an imperial power. Their main brief was to continue their imperial government. But even they did not accept that a confession made to a police officer could be made admissible by itself. It is our government, Indian government, which has resorted to a technique which even the British did not think it was permissible. And in 3 laws, they first did it in Tata, then they did it in Kota, and now it is still continuing in Makoka. Namely, a confession made to a police officer would be admissible evidence. I recall what I had argued in the Parliament attack case in the Supreme Court when the investigating agency had procured the confessions of all the 4 accused persons in that case, and they were relying upon that very strongly. I had said, of course, the law is still clear that a confession to be relied upon must be voluntary and truthful. 2 conditions. It must be voluntary and truthful. And what I argued before the Supreme Court was, how does it happen that a person who commits such a serious offense, like a terrorist act, killing a large number of people, as soon as he is arrested by the police, his conscience starts pricking him, and he feels well, I must make a clean breast of all that I have done. I must make a voluntary and truthful confession. And it is impossible to believe that these confessions could be voluntary and truthful, that they must have been procured by some kind of torture, etc. I am happy to say that the Supreme Court accepted this argument and rejected the confessions of all the four accused persons, including the person Afzal Group, who had been convicted by the Supreme Court. He was convicted on the basis of the other circumstantial evidence, but the confession made by him was rejected by the Supreme Court. They said it was impossible to believe that every accused person, the day he is arrested, his conscience pricks him, and the very next day he is prepared to make a confession, voluntary confession, to the police authorities. Knowing this, how is it that our system of governance is still permitting a law like Makoka, in which a confession made to a police officer is admissible? Now, this Ashish Khaitan has demonstrated by the various documents that he has produced that all these cases, in fact, it is so conclusive, particularly in Malegaon blast, which is totally connected, same evidence on which they were relying against the original accused persons in Malegaon blast, which were certain Muslim persons alleged to be connected with Simi. And later on, when the theory changed, that some Hindutva forces were responsible for those Malegaon blasts, and it became crystal clear that the original confessions procured from these original set of accused persons were false. But the very confessions of those accused persons are still being relied upon for the other blast case.
They also had an approver, sir.
They also approver. They made an approver. Therefore, all this requires very close attention, not only by the courts, but by the society, Indian society also. If we want to keep the India safe and the Indians safe from these kind of police officers, we will have to think about it. The society would have to be woken up, and the courts will also have to be woken up, that as to how they rely upon these people. They have set techniques. First, confessions procured by torture or by other methods. False confessions. Sometimes they may be true also, but in most cases, false confessions are recorded. Secondly, the other technique is recovery of some material. Now, Ashish Khaitan has also demonstrated that the recovery of material, namely these explosives, etc., for Malegaon blast, shown to have been recovered on the basis of those confessions, have been shown to be proved to be false by the subsequent investigation, when a totally different set of people were found responsible for that. And still, the same recovery is being relied upon, and the stock witnesses. The third technique when the police uses it, of course, the British had said that a recovery to respectable witnesses of the locality was required. But it is the stock reply of the police in every case. Respectable people don't come to witness the recovery, and therefore we have to rely on whatever kind of evidence are available. And normally the police has stock witnesses with them on which they have some kind of a control. I have known it even when I conducted my wife's own criminal case in a criminal court in Delhi, in which an ice cream vendor evidence was being relied upon by the police. And when I questioned the ice cream vendor, he was selling ice cream on a street, and he said that he had seen that the car was going at a high speed, etc., and it was big, and how the accident. Of course, the technical experts have proved that the entire case was false. But that stock witness, namely a person who had no license to sell ice cream, was under the control of the police because they could prosecute him at any time, and therefore he had to say whatever the police wanted him to say, and therefore instead of selling ice cream and concentrating on that, according to police version, he was watching the cars going on the road at a little distance, their speed and how they were being driven and how the accidents were taking place, etc. So this is the third technique that the police uses, to have stock witnesses used by them, sometimes even as eyewitnesses, sometimes as witnesses to prove other things, etc. These are the methods which they had learned during the British time. At that time, the agenda of the government was to continue the British rule, therefore keep the people terrorized. But today we are in a public where the people are the masters, and today how can the people perfect their own agencies which have been set up by them to use these methods which have been taught? In fact, 60 years before today, the system of reform of the police system, the investigation system should have started. But it has not started. The same police, the same techniques are still being used, and everyone knows who has had to deal with the police as to what is the percentage of corruption in the police, among the police people itself. And it is the same agency. Therefore, we are ashamed that the people who are responsible for governance in this country have not taken stock of this position and tried to correct all the wrongs which are taking place in the police system, not confined to CBI. Of course, today the papers have reported that 2 CID officers, one of the SP level, one of the inspector level, who were engaged in the Colgate case, have been caught accepting bribes, perhaps not connected to the Colgate case, but in some other matter, accepting bribes of many lakhs. And now, if this is the position in the CBI, then one can just imagine what would be the position in the normal state police, etc. Therefore, the whole system is crying loudly for police reforms, and the people must stand up today to ask for police reform. That the first thing that the people require in this country is the police reform and total change of the investigative system. We require a police like the British police, which is friendly to the law-abiding people, not this kind of police which we have to suffer every day. Why? Why doesn't this message go into the ears of the Prime Minister and his colleagues and the other people of the ruling class of different parties? That is what the people will have to insist, that they must listen to this crying demand. That people remaining in jail, innocent people remaining in jail for not only 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, etc. Of course, some of these reforms we are thinking about in the Aam Aadmi Party, because Aam Aadmi Party has been formed only to change the politics of the country, to bring back the politics of the country to real issues of governance, etc. And one of the measures which we are considering is whether we should not have a provision of mandatory bail after 1/3 of the maximum sentence has already been suffered by a person in detention on account of continued trial, and 5 years maximum, namely even in death sentence cases, not more than 5 years. Either the trial must be completed within that time, 1/3 of the maximum, or 5 years, whichever is less. Therefore, these are some of the measures which people of this country must stand up to demand from those who are in charge of the governance in the country. I compliment Ashish Khaitan for this explosive disclosure that he has made. Of course, one expected it from him because he has been an investigator with Talca here for the last 12 years. He has been engaged in investigative journalism, and the investigation that he makes is so meticulous, so foolproof, that nobody can get away from it, from the truth of it. Therefore, I am very happy that he has come out today with this document which will open the eyes of the public, apart from opening the eyes of the people in politics and government. I must thank him from the bottom of my heart for this very important